Destiny offers various build paths that you can take, but you gotta admit, punching stuff is probably the most fun you can have in the game. We've seen that with the Solar Titan and we've seen that with the Assassin Scout Arc Hunter, but now we have a new king. This build allows you to stun 2 of the 3 champion types with abilities alone. Not only that, but you can get healing just on melee hits, you don't even need to kill anything. And that melee damage stacks like crazy. So, do you like punching stuff? Are you a fan of dodge? Do you enjoy grabbing your nuts and going straight into the thick of things? And have you ever wanted to do the electric slide in-game? If any of these things sound like something you wanted to do, then this is the build for you. But before we move on, make sure you hit the like for the YouTube algorithm and subscribe to my channel if you enjoy Destiny 2 content. I upload weekly. Now let's go! I'm shaking things up this video, so let's start with the exotic. For this build, we're going to use the Liar's Handshake. Using your arc melee ability or being hit by a melee attack will allow you to follow up with an extremely powerful melee counter punch that will also heal you. This buff is called Cross Counter and it's active for 3 seconds after a melee or after getting hit by a melee. Your melee damage will get increased by a staggering 200%. On top of that, this will also stack with one of our aspects, so our gameplay loop is actually incredibly fun. Just bear in mind that if you use a shotgun with 1-2 punch, the damage buff is actually nerfed to 80%, which is not really optimal, but we'll cover that in a sec. So let's get on to the gameplay loop. In contrast with my other builds, this one actually requires a bit of thinking. Not even thinking, but more tracking your buffs. This will get a lot simpler after Bungie updates the UI, and I cannot wait for that because seeing only 4 buffs is simply not enough. Whenever you get into an engagement, you first start with your dodge because that will empower your melee attack. After that, you melee a red bar, which will get them jolted and create a big arc explosion which has a lot of AoE. Then you will dodge next to another enemy which will refresh your melee and you can do it all over again. If your fingers are quick enough, you can even empower Cross Counter, and that will result in tons of damage. You will need to be very brave with this build because it requires punching everything, which means you'll be in close quarters. It is definitely not for the faint of heart, especially as you go up in difficulty from Legend to Master. Through various aspects, fragments and mods, we will have a lot of survivability, but still you kinda gotta be careful. Once you get to a boss or a mini boss, your combination blow should be at 3 stacks. Once you're at 3 stacks, you dodge next to the boss, you hit them with the combo blow, then you freeze them quickly, or you use 1-2 punch and hit them with the cross counter. After that, you can do another combo blow, and this should delete most of the mini bosses in the game and do a lot of damage on most of the bosses too. As you can see on these Carl clips, there's a lot of numbers that hang in the air, but basically getting 3 hits in should result in way more than 300k damage whatever you do. If you do this rotation on any champion, it will get positively melted. Which brings us to stunning champions. Jolt will take care of overload champions and we will have that on our grenade. Blind will take care of unstoppable champions and we'll have that on our melee if we hit a jolted target, which is not difficult to do. To simplify the rotation as much as possible, it's dodge hit, dodge hit, dodge hit, find the boss, dodge hit, then hit with shotgun, then hit again, then dodge hit. The damage output will be simply out of this world, as you can see in all of these clips. And after the rotation, if whatever you're hitting is not dead, you probably have your super already, so just super that bitch. I've already mentioned some of them, but let's move on to our abilities. For the super, we're going to use Gathering Storm because it does the most damage. For the dodge, we're going to use Gambler's Dodge. Dodging near an enemy will refresh our melee. This is the ability which will allow us to stack our combination blow. For the melee, we're going with combination blow. Killing an enemy with the powered melee attack will increase the damage of the next powered melee attack, which can stack up to 3 times. And for the grenade, we're going to use Pulse Grenade because it does the most damage. Now let's move to our aspects and fragments. Our first aspect is Flow State. Defeating a jolted target will make us amplified. While you're amplified, your dodge recharges more quickly, you are more resilient while dodging, and your reload speed is greatly increased. We are mostly using this for the higher levels of survivability. Our next aspect is Lethal Current. After dodging, your next melee attack has increased lunge range, jolts the target, and creates a damaging aftershock. Damaging any jolted target with melee attacks also blinds them. This aspect will give us a lot of AoE, it will increase our melee damage, and it will allow us to stun unstoppable champions. Overall, you can say this is the whole package. Our first fragment is Spark of Ions. Defeating a jolted target will create an Ionic Trace. Ionic Traces decrease the cooldowns of all of our abilities, so this is very important to have. Our next fragment is Spark of Feedback. Taking melee damage briefly increases your outgoing melee damage. Honestly, this one is mostly used for the +10 resilience it provides, but every once in a while it will buff your melee damage. If you want to change it with anything, I would go with Spark of Magnitude, which will increase the duration of our pulse grenade. Then we have Spark of Resistance. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage. Considering we'll be in the thick of things and will always be surrounded by combatants, this one is very important. And lastly, we have Spark of Shock. Your arc grenades will jolt targets. This together with our melee will stop unstoppable champions and is just a very big damage increase. Let's move on to the weapon selection. In the kinetic slot, you should go with Conditional Finality if you have access to it. Freezing a target, then shattering it with your melee will increase your damage substantially. If that is not an option, I would go with a shotgun that has 1-2 punch and you just use it on an enemy before your cross counter attack. That should result in 130,000 damage per cross counter attack, which is very huge. And of course, if you combine it with the buff from your dodge, well, it just goes nuts. In the energy slot, just use a primary that makes sense for you. I would advise on something that has Volt Shot. And that's because killing any jolted targets will result in us getting Ionic Traces, which lowers our cooldowns, which is really good. In the power slot, just go with something that does big damage. In my case, it's an Adept Hothead with Explosive Light, but you can even get a good blowout that has Demo and Vorpal Weapon. And now, let's finish it off with the armor mods. On the helmet, put Hands On at least twice, and then you can put a Siphon mod if you have the space for it. Considering pretty much any kill we're getting with this build will be a melee kill, this will give us a lot of super energy very quickly. On the arms, the most important thing is to get heavy-handed because that will give you an Orb of Power on melee kills. From then on, you can use Impact Induction because on melee kills it will reduce your grenade cooldown, which is very big. Any other cooldown reduction mods will also be very helpful. On the chest, you should use resistance mods that go with your activity of choice. However, in my case, I've also went with Charge It Up and Emergency Reinforcement. That way we have an extra armor charge and we also get more damage resistant when we are in red health. On the boots, I've went with Stacks on Stacks, Recuperation and Better Already. That way we get extra armor charges whenever we pick up an Orb of Power, and also every time we pick up an Orb of Power we get health regeneration and also we cure ourselves. Getting that health regeneration is just so important with melee builds such as this one. Finally, for the cloak, use Bomber twice, which will reduce your grenade cooldown anytime you dodge, and then use Reaper after you dodge and you get a weapon kill. This will generate an Orb of Power. These just complete our build in such a beautiful way. Your grenade uptime will be just dumb. And that's about it for the build, Guardians. I hope you liked it. If you did, make sure you hit the like for the YouTube algorithm and subscribe to my channel if you enjoy Destiny content I post at least once a week. Eyes up, Guardian, and I'll see you in the next one.